Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live for this Friday afternoon, evening, Saturday morning, depending where you are. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and as always, so grateful that you're here with us. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. It means a lot to us to get to spend the time with you, and we got a great show for you. Second hour, as promised yesterday, Jimmy will be here and we'll do your Bible questions. If you've got a question about the Bible, whether it's an internal question, you just want to know what was happening with Joseph and his brothers, or with Jesus and the apostles, or maybe it's an external question, like where did the Bible come from and who are the people that wrote it or who put it together. Any Bible question is welcome. Second hour, 888-318-7884 is our number. This hour, we're going to go a little bit of a different direction than we usually get to go, and I'm very excited about the hour because I know that this is something people think a great deal about, but we have not taken the time to talk about it. And that is the relationship between the modern idea of environmentalism and the modern environmental movement and the Catholic faith, your Catholic faith, my Catholic faith. What is the relationship there? Certainly the current Pope, Pope Francis, has had a great deal to say in that regard. Earlier popes too have, to one degree or another. And so your calls on being a Catholic and the environmental movement this hour are welcome. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. And we have just pretty much a perfect guest for this topic. Dr. William Fahey, as I found out earlier today, does have a master's in the science of environmental science, but that's only a tiny part of his education. He's also the president of Thomas More College up in New Hampshire. New Hampshire?
That was good.
That was pretty good.
That was pretty good.
And he's trained in the classical period with the PhD from Catholic University of America. Dr. William Fahey, thank you for being with us.
It's a delight to be here.
So it does seem to me that there are religious aspects to the modern environmental movement. Not all of them are kind of alignable with I'm making up words but I think alignable is that a word?
We'll accept.
All right. I checked with the president of a university and he said he'll accept with Catholic faith. Is that fair to say that there's kind of a religion of environmentalism in some ways?
Yeah, I think in most of modern life, if you don't have a strong commitment to any religion, let's just put aside Catholicism or Christianity, but if you don't have a religious orientation, you can't stop the way you're constructed. Humans are constructed to seek something beyond themselves that's more powerful than themselves. We know, because of our faith, they're designed to seek God.
Yeah.
Right? But if, for whatever reason, you reject God, you were raised in such a way you don't know religion, that impulse is still there. So I think one of the reasons that environmentalism is so attractive in the modern world is it presents nature as a kind of force that must be attended to. We have to look at ourselves as small in its presence. We must serve it in a way, and so it becomes more than a quasi-religion. It literally becomes, for some people, a religion. That is not where a considerable number of environmentalists are, but an important element of what we call the environmental movement is shot through with religious positions and qualities.
Well, then, could it say a person with deep religious commitments? Then this time let's talk about Catholics in particular. Well, does that person have environmental kind of obligations? Is it fair to say, or is there an environmentalism, in other words, that is in itself Christian and is not hostile to Christianity or not a substitute for Christianity?
I think, to put it another way, can a Christian or Catholic be an environmentalist? Should he be an environmentalist? Is there an obligation for a religious person? Let's cut to the chase. I can't speak on, I teach courses on the great religions, but I don't want to say, should a Buddhist be an environmentalist? In some respects, I don't care as much as I care about the issue, should we be environmentalists or should we have a concern? And I think the answer to that is very simple. Look at the second chapter of Genesis. And when Adam is placed in the garden, it's said very specifically he's placed there to tend and to till creation. to tend and to till. Now, Pope Francis does a lot with that expression in his encyclical on the environment. But in so doing, he's actually very traditional. St. Thomas has in his treatise on creation, which is a section of the Summa, he has a long section. In one of his questions, he deals with what is meant by Adam's obligation to tend and to till. And it's an obligation. So there is something that is part of our faith that has to do with man as steward of the environment or having dominion over the natural order that does spill over into what we today call environmentalism.
Right. So we have the duty to kind of, that's care for, or I suppose the word that's most commonly used is be stewards of, or to steward. Is that a fair word? To be
To be a steward, I think, is a fair understanding of what Scripture means by to tend.
Yeah.
Right. To till is more obvious. It's a sort of responsible cultivation and use of the resources of the natural order. What does tend mean? And it's fascinating to see some of the things that St. Thomas and others do in unpacking that account. It's interesting to note, so Pope Francis caught a little bit of flack, more than a little bit of flack, when he came out with this encyclical, because for many people it seems such a strange thing, a radical thing to spend time on the environment. And there's a kind of caricature that, oh, now it's a mortal sin to use a plastic straw and this kind of nonsense.
Right.
There are rhetorical elements of that encyclical that, I wish the Holy Father didn't express it a certain way, but his meditation on creation is quite traditional in the sense of, if you go back and you look at the fathers of the church, the most common thing for them to write about is creation. So we have fantastic early commentaries on the beginning of Genesis. They're not environmentalists in our sense,
right?
But they are pondering what is man's relationship to the other things that are called creature. How is he to relate to them? How is his, to use the word that you suggested, stewardship, related to our salvation and our own acting in the image and likeness of God? So to ponder that question is a very traditional question. It's not new to Pope Francis. And really, Laudato Si', which is his encyclical on the environment, draws very, very heavily on the language, sometimes literally lifting the language used by Pope Benedict and John Paul II, who were very outspoken on the environment.
Yes. Okay. So, and it does seem to me that one of the reasons why we need popes and bishops to speak about the environment is that if they don't do that, then a very sick view carries the day. And that view is increasingly a view that is hostile to the human person as an offense to nature. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And this is, I think, the best defense of why it makes sense for there to be an encyclical is just this. The alternative is that they don't speak on the environment. And as to use an analogy, once I had a friend of mine who's a priest. It was during the Gulf War, and a number of us were sitting around, and there was very much a divided opinion amongst this group of all very Orthodox, mostly conservative or traditional Catholics, on the Gulf War, the Iraq conflict. And someone said, I just wish the bishops, wouldn't speak on this subject. I wish they wouldn't speak on it. And he simply said, so you think it would be better for the bishops to be silent on the issue of war? And everyone realized, no, that's not what we mean. It's just, I wish they were more careful in what they said. And that's very true, because we have to remember with the social teachings of the church, what's binding on us are those things that are matters of faith and morals. Other things are prudential, that out of a kind of filial charity, we should listen and consider. So if a pontiff makes recommendations in an encyclical that are clearly prudential, right? The end is man should recognize he's a steward of the created order and has certain responsibilities. Okay, that's we don't dispute that.
No.
Now, what's the path to doing that? Well, bishops and the Holy Father are certainly in their right to make suggestions.
Right.
Where it gets confusing is when people think that those suggestions are all of a sudden the teaching of the church.
Sure. Yeah, right.
But if we don't talk about that, then we feed into a kind of pagan approach or a secular approach to ideology that views man as separated from the created order and therefore a threat to the created order.
Right.
And that's a disaster. If we
Yes.
view man as a threat, then then environmentalism is going to, by default, by a kind of sinister logic, support things like abortion, birth control, heavy-handed population control, an anti-human ecology.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking when you hear about young men and women who, responding to the kind of moral logic of the secular environmental movement, are refusing to have children because they see that as somehow an assault on the environment. The act of refusing to have children is so. It's just heartbreaking that they're missing out on parenthood, that they're
Right.
missing out because of a sick view of the meaning of the whole universe, as if your children are going to be a problem for the universe.
Right. Yeah, I actually love getting in conversations with secular environmentalists on that issue.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them are not hostile at all. They're actually kind of curious about religious people and what religious people think about these things. So population control, population limits, that's big amongst secular environmentalists. And I will, if I can have a conversation with such a person, I'll usually say, well, so if you don't mind me asking, since you've brought it up, are you using contraception in order to achieve that? And of course they are. They're not using periodic abstinence or something. They're using artificial contraception. Then I'll say, well, that's fascinating. You and I would agree that the kind of wanton, destructive pollution of an ecosystem is a disaster for everything in that ecosystem, right? That's bad.
Yeah.
And you can usually see right away in the thoughtful ones, they see where it's going. Because the next question is, well, how about in the own ecosystem of your body? You're absolutely,
Yeah.
that you're polluting your body. And worse yet, you're upset at medications that are going into the water supply system because it's changing the nature of fish. You're upset about that. What do you think happens when you pass all those birth controls out of your body into the water supply system? You're actually causing the problems that you don't even think about at all.
Right.
And the last thing with such a person is upfront tell them, contraception's evil and you need to stop that.
No.
You have to wait for that moment
Right.
in building the friendship. But just to get them to think of their highest principles and to see that they're violating them,
Right.
and that a Catholic is actually living a life where there's a harmony between his own personal, to put it into modern terms because everything's personal, your own personal living out of life and your view towards the rest of the environment.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
They see that right away.
Oh, that's wonderful that
Yeah.
they do see it.
Yeah, oh,
And
absolutely.
It's good to hear that you don't experience a hostility in that, because I suppose everything is so partisan and politicized now. We expect hostility, but there doesn't really. This is not one that there is a natural hostility in the way that, for example, a real pro-abortion person, yeah, you can understand why that person would be hostile to the Catholic message, but there's no natural reason why a person who's deeply passionate about the quality of the air or the water or the land should have any enmity
none.
with the Christian
One of the
person.
reasons I went back a few years ago and got a master's in environmental science was, I'm genuinely interested in the issue, and I also needed to bone up on my science background. But I wanted to see what made this group of people tick. I would say that the majority of people are increasingly, even if it's in an unreflective way, quote, pro-environment. And one of the things I discovered in my classes, we'd have classes on, writing these theoretical papers about how would you work with a local government on environmental policy. And I wrote a paper that was based on St. Thomas's treatise called On Kingship, which has a section on the sustainability of the city. So I laid out this position using that as the text. And in our discussions, before people realized what I was using, they're like, wow, this is a really interesting approach to government. Where's that coming from? And I'm like, well, this is actually medieval monarchical theory of St. Thomas Aquinas. And people would be dumbfounded, like, really?
Yeah.
And then I would always get the kind of quiet, wow, are there actually other Christians like you?
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
they of course come in, as we all do, assuming we know the other side.
Yeah.
But there are people who are generally interested. If you're in graduate school, it's often because you're interested in learning and discovering the truth, or at least discovering information and knowledge.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of ground for Catholics if they will come up to speed and just think through, I'm not necessarily against taking care of water supply systems and sustaining biodiversity. Those are pretty good things.
Right.
So I need to find where the shared principles are on these issues.
Dr. William Fahey is our guest. He's the president of Thomas More College in New Hampshire, and we will be right back. I went really late, but I will get to your calls. If you have a question about Catholicism and environmentalism, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Right back after this.
Catch Catholic Answers live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
The EWTN home video highlight for July is A Church in Crisis. The church is under attack from within and from without. Through the chaos, Dr. Ralph Martin illuminates the path forward for a church in crisis. Order your DVD set at EWTNRC.com 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or call 1-800-854-6316.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Second hour, Jimmy Akin will be here. We'll do your Bible questions for Jimmy Akin. This hour, Dr. William Fahey from St. Thomas More College in New Hampshire is here, and we're talking about environmentalism and Catholicism. If you have questions in that regard, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. I do want to welcome you if you're not a Catholic, and you might be interested in the Catholic view on care for what we Catholics call creation. 888-318-7884. I am going to go to the phones. Before I do, it's time to make a decision. Do you want to save $30 or not? Today is decision day. It's your final chance. This is the last day of early bird savings for the Catholic Answers Conference, September 23rd through 26th, right here in sunny San Diego, the beautiful Hyatt Regency La Jolla. You get $30 off if you use the promo code EARLY up until midnight tonight. Full conference ticket includes the banquet dinner with Bishop Joseph Strickland, but you can also get just the talks if you'd like. We just want you there, and we're not charging a lot, and we're taking $30 off right now. CatholicAnswersConference.com, and we say midnight, we mean midnight Hawaii time, so you got till it's midnight in Honolulu. You can still sign up. CatholicAnswersConference.com. Use the promo code EARLY to get $30 off. Dr. William Fahey, thank you for not running out, for staying here for phone calls. We're talking about the environment with Dr. Fahey. The anti-humanism of the modern world is getting a bit frightening. I mean, like even technologists, they talk about, when can we transcend being human? There just seems to be this sense that we're the problem. We're just a terrible problem, and we need to overcome that problem. We already talked about how that can infect environmentalism, but is there an opportunity for us to talk about, and I felt perhaps maybe that the Pope was doing this in Laudato Si, a kind of humanistic environmentalism where, like, clean water and open spaces, these are things God intends for every human being. And so that even if I'm a person who I don't care about plants and animals, I don't know what kind of maniac says that, but say they do. Well, there's a humanistic reason to be an environmentalist.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And again, it's something that I hear a concern about is this is not part of our tradition.
Oh yeah.
Right. This is a sign of the encroachment of modernism in the church that it's speaking on. the environmental issues. This is, again, this is just simply ignorance of the tradition. So if you go back to 13th century Paris and most medieval cities, they have considerable regulation, what we would call regulation rules, on exactly what you just described, the water supply and the way people should be treating their soil and how the crops should be rotated, right? Which we know now, environmentalists have studied this very carefully. Medieval crop rotation is actually brilliant when it comes to, it's the first organic farming, right? Allowing the earth to rest, diversity of crops leads to diminishment of weeds, insects, leads to higher productivity. Who's the beneficiary of that? Man.
Yes, right.
So being a good steward of the environment is beneficial to man. And back on the issue of the anti-humanists and the environment, this is another great point to kind of quietly engage people. Again, in this graduate program, we were always being asked to consider policies and learning about different theories and learning about the great evil of speciesism, for example.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's how dare you elevate your humanity above the other species of the earth. And every time this kind of thing came up, and it was a minority position, I want to be clear on that, but when it would come up, I would ask the person who was hot about this. I would just say, the last time I checked, the red-tailed hawks were not forming legislation about the sustainability of squirrels and woodchucks.
Right.
Right. The only people who are doing what we're doing, talking about sustaining the environment, are humans.
Right.
Clearly, your own behavior suggests you believe you're superior to all the other parts of the created order.
Right.
And I affirm your belief.
You're right. You are.
I'm with you on that.
Yes, right.
So,
Yeah.
some of this idiocy you're just kind of patient and humorous. You can lead people to at least reconsider it if they're rational.
Right.
And reason's under siege right now, so you
Reason-
can't
that's
exactly
always right,
count
yeah.
on people being rational. But
No, you can't. But speciesism as an affliction is a silliness. I mean,
absolutely.
No species has it except humans. No one's accusing gorillas of speciesism. I don't think. And there's a reason for that. They're dumb. Maybe that's not the nicest way to say it, but they can't think of it.
And other animals are not necessarily on their own kind to the environment.
Oh no!
So
right.
they'll overgraze.
Oh sure.
Outside of the balancing power of a complete system.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Jordan in Hartford, Connecticut, listening on Catholic Answers Live app. I'm really sorry to all the gorillas that I called dumb, but they're not listening because they're dumb. Jordan in Hartford, go ahead with your question for Dr. William Fahey.
Hi, Dr. Fahey. So I'm new to the Catholic faith, so I've been going to the Catholic church since about February, and I've been I've read Humanae Vitae, and I'm reading Laudato Si now, and I just really into all this stuff.
Wait a second. You just came into I don't know if I understood you. You came into the church in February. You've read Humanae Vitae, and you're working on Laudato Si?
Yes.
Cool. God bless you, brother.
Catechizing myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's like I came from an evangelical Protestant background, so all this stuff is really new, but it's really clicking and everything. So I really love it, and I hope to do. And I think I begin all CIA in the fall.
Well, praise God. We'll pray for you. That's beautiful. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Fahey.
So my question is this. So we know that Humanae Vitae is an indelible teaching. So we know that contraception is bad. We don't want to do contraception. We know that we have to listen to Pope Pius VI, St. Pope Paul VI, when it comes to not doing contraception. So should we view Laudato Si as an infallible teaching too? Is it, as Catholics, are we supposed to recycle, or we use the air conditioning less to conserve electricity and not participate in the throwaway culture? How as a Catholic or as a Christian in general should we view Laudato Si and the teachings in it?
Thank you, Jordan.
That's a great question, and it's applicable, Jordan, to many of the documents that you're going to be reading over the next few years. Welcome on board. I think it's wonderful that you are on this journey deeper and deeper into the heart of the church. With Laudato Si, this is what we typically call a document of the social teaching of the Catholic Church. And this document, and this is true of all the documents of the social teaching, will take the doctrinal truths as the bedrock, and then work out prudential matters in them. So interpreting a document, Laudato Si, you have to be careful. It's just true, we know from Scripture and tradition, it's just true that man is called to be a particular kind of steward of the created order. That's true. Now, how we do that, that's a prudential matter.
I want you to, we got to cut you off, but we'll let you finish on the other
Very
side. Okay, Jordan, I'm sorry I didn't do the clock very well, but hang on. We'll let Dr. William Fahey finish his answer. We're talking about Catholicism and environmentalism this hour. Your questions are welcome. 888-318-7884.
Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Enter promo code EARLY to save $30. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Dr. William Fahey is our guest. He's the president of Thomas More College in New Hampshire, and he's getting the Catholic Answers treatment. We invite him out here and we say, could you give a talk? And then we run him around, making him give like 10. How many talks do you give? I mean, including right now being almost
five or
six. Yeah.
in 3 days.
Let me just tell you, never accept an invitation from Catholic Answers. Don't do it. Jordan in Connecticut made us so happy. He's coming into the Catholic Church, starting RCIA soon, and wants to know if we have an encyclical such as Humanae Vitae, where it's quite clear that the prohibition on the use of contraception is a solid moral teaching, one that we're required to follow. He wants to know how much are we required to follow of what's taught in Laudato Si.
Yeah, usually the church is good about being clear on when there's something we must believe. And so Paul VI made it clear, and everyone knew because of the publicity around trying to make the decision on birth control. And that was a heated debate in the 1950s and early 60s. So it was made clear that here's a position that Catholics must hold. Laudato Si has rhetoric that's quite feisty and fiery and very much the temperament of Pope Francis, but he never says, by my authority as pontiff, I declare a doctrine that you may not use a plastic straw under pain of mortal sin. He doesn't say that. The document is often interpreted as saying things like that, but it doesn't. And so when we read, Jordan asked an excellent question.
Yeah.
When we read church documents, we should do the best we can to try to understand what kind of document is it? And is it proposing things prudentially? And that's the job of the social teaching. And we need to take those proposals seriously, but they're not all binding as a matter of faith and morals. In fact, quite a number of them are not. But the objective of Laudato Si is man must be a steward of the environment. He has an obligation in charity to assist his brethren, and a bad management of our environment may be harming the poorest of the poor. That's indisputable.
Right, indisputable.
Indisputable.
Yes.
How we do that, now we need to be creative, and we need to thank Pope Francis for reminding us and modernizing our ancient obligations. How do we do that?
Yeah.
That's prudential.
Fair enough. Thanks, Jordan. And again, welcome. And call again if you have another question. I did think that occasionally I would hear criticisms of Laudato Si that went like, why is he worried about the water when we've got, millions of children being aborted? Well, it's probably true that in, Cleveland, and I'm not saying that it was people from Cleveland who said this. I don't want to, but that the water issue is not a life or death issue. But in much of the world, it is a life or death issue.
Absolutely. It's becoming more so.
Yeah. Again, Jordan, thanks. Let's go to John in Trenton, New Jersey, listening on EWTN. John, glad to have you. Go ahead with your question for our guest, Dr. William Fahey.
Good afternoon, Si.
Good afternoon, John.
And good luck to Marie.
Oh,
Marie
you're very
and
kind.
David.
That's
I
very
had that
kind.
talk last night.
Yeah, we're going to miss her.
Now, Dr. Fahey, I graduated from Manhattan College twice, in 1983 and 1984. That's a Roman Catholic college located in the Bronx. That's a story for another day. But it is a wonderful engineering school. And in the late 40s, the college started a sanitary engineering program, dealing with the environment and environmental issues and engineering solutions for them for the benefit of New York City. And Manhattan did a lot of great work to make sure that the Hudson River was pure in terms of sewage treatment plants, air pollution control, so on and so forth. In my opinion, just one more thing before I ask my question. In my opinion, the United States does a lousy job, one of the lousiest jobs in the world on solid waste. We don't recycle enough. We don't reuse enough. And for example, in New York City, they transport solid waste from restaurants in 20 cubic yard containers out to Ohio and Indiana and deposit the waste out there.
Okay.
Because they don't have a new landfill.
So
My question is, what is the policy of the Catholic Church on specific environmental issues in first world countries where they don't do a good job, if they have a lot of land area, where they do not do a good job of handling and processing solid waste purely based on laziness?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question, and thanks for providing a really interesting example of something that people should always be mindful of. You talk about, I'm not familiar with Manhattan College, but you talk about a Catholic college that has a program in the sciences and engineering that has made a major contribution to an area of our life and modern science that's important. And this is actually very consistent with the history of the whole church. The church is not opposed to science. In fact, the church is deeply engaged in scientific research and supporting and encouraging the sciences. Now, what is the church's actual policy, as you put it, for recycle, reuse, taking a stand on first world countries that have a bad record? Well, the policy is the Lazarus and Dives policy. That's what we'll call it. The church, it would be folly if the church had a specific policy on what strategy should be taken to deal with these environmental issues. It yields to the rightful place in politics, economics, and science to deal with that. Where it yields no ground is on Lazarus and Dives. That's to say and constantly remind the wealthy person, be careful. Be careful, because the gifts you've received should never corrupt you to the point where you neglect the poor in your midst. And I think the Church's teaching on the environment is simply making on a larger level the story of Lazarus and Dives, that those who have built up wealth and power and have a fantastic ability to do good should thank God for their blessings, and they should do the good that they're capable of doing. And therefore, when they have a bad record in any area, environmentalism, banking, politics, the Church is in its rights to rebuke first world countries, but it would be unusual for them to have a specific policy in mind.
Okay, yeah, because the Church isn't really competent as a scientist or an engineer in her magisterium.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
I mean, you have a master's degree in it, but the rest of us don't.
Yeah, theology, being a bishop does not give you competence to, or the right to speak on specifically narrowly scientific matters. I'm always hesitant to use that expression because it's very hard to untangle our moral life from, which the Church does have a right and an obligation to make pronouncements on, from political, scientific, financial actions.
Yes.
So
the Church, for example, could say, I mean, you're wasting tremendous amounts of food in the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't propose a solution to the problem, but has a legitimate point in saying, look, there's people over in this neighborhood who are hungry. In this neighborhood, you're throwing food away.
Yeah.
Find a solution.
Yeah. Are you comfortable, nation, with massive overweight, obesity, things that are actually harming you? Are you comfortable with that, and you're comfortable with the dumpsters outside of all your restaurants while people are starving in your midst?
Yeah.
Just propose the question. Who can then say, I am comfortable?
Yes.
I mean, I know there are some people who say that, but that's just...
But it's not going to be the common person. I mean, that's part of the goodness of the human person. They often do respond when there's a moral authority who will call them.
That's right.
Thanks, John. Thanks very much. I really appreciate that. Ed in Toledo, Ohio. Well, now, Ed, have you got Manhattan's trash out there? Because he said they're sending it to Ohio. Go ahead with your question, Ed.
I think there is an arrangement that trash does come to different states, and one of the concerns we have in Toledo is that how do is whether a place that takes waste cheats and sort of seems to there was an accusation that they increased the illegal limit of what could be done.
Right.
I'm not that familiar with that particular situation, but it is true that Toledo is a city that was a previous industrial site, and it still is an industrial powerhouse. And you have things like waste that went in, chemicals that we weren't aware of as their toxic, their level, and we have areas that you can't fish and stuff.
Yeah.
So that is true. My concern is there seems to be a contention between those. Like myself, I see myself as a person that solves people problems by being a producer. I feel that producing things is a beneficial ministry in a way, or has that aspect that by producing things like food, by producing things like buildings and and some forms of transportation and so on, that the ability to solve the human needs are when people are efficient at delivering services and helping the society have these services.
Right, but
And
then I'm guessing
they're
and then people turn around and blame you as the producer, whether it's the home builder. Here in California, for some reason, we have a schizophrenic relationship with home builders. We desperately need them and we hate them. So the producer then ends up being the locus of the criticism of the environmentalist. Is that essentially it, Ed?
You're zeroing in on it. My point is that you're zeroing in on it. The people, some people are anti-development, and this goes for, say, missionaries or whatever. They don't want, some people feel that part of the solution is producing, for the benefit of everyone, things like health care, services, and those things. And they're also simultaneously, people are nervous, are even like you said, have an animus toward the producers who that's exactly the problem. Go on with, yes.
Okay. Dr. Fahey, can you comment on that?
A little bit. This is, Ed's kind of hit upon a common aggravating problem. And the very people who make the things, generate the wealth that allow for sustainability of all sorts, including environmental sustainability, are viewed as the enemy rather than brought into a kind of cooperative relationship. Now, why does that happen, and what can we do about it? Again, this is another illustration of prudence is just really hard.
Yeah.
Prudence is hard. There's not a mathematical solution to any of these problems. So you drive through, as I have, rural Kentucky, you drive through eastern Kentucky, and you can see that the producers of something that I'm supportive of, coal power, have devastated without regard to the local population. They have absolutely devastated the environment, which has harmed those people. Mostly these are companies that are owned by outsiders who have nothing to do with that locality. And so it's simply true that coal producers have behaved in a horrific way in many areas where they operate. Then you come to my area, New England, and you look at people who produce something wonderful for us, lobstermen.
Yeah.
Okay, lobstermen suffer, they're just getting pummeled by stupid regulations of the lobster industry that rightly was initially concerned with bringing back stable populations of lobsters. The seas are now filled with an abundance of lobsters, but the state of Maine and other New England states, because of financial pressure, reduce the number of lobster licenses, and they also manipulate the environment. They make it very difficult for those producers, the fishermen, to actually harvest the lobsters. Now, anyone who's a listener who hunts, I hunt, knows that the best thing humans can do is consume things in the environment.
Oh, yeah.
Healthy ecosystems need someone at the top of the pyramid that harvests. Areas where there is hunting, have regulated hunting, have a far richer environment than areas where hunting is banned. So the regulatory question, which often targets so-called developers or producers, is complicated because it's a prudential matter. And there are
So you in other words, you have to have be flexible enough mentally and bureaucratically to deal with the people who are taking mountaintops off in West Virginia, and also deal with the people who are making ridiculous lobster rules in Maine or wherever. I don't think they have lobster rules in New Hampshire. Fairly certain they don't. Do they?
Well, we have Portsmouth is a really vibrant port city for New Hampshire.
Oh,
so we do have a bit of coastline.
My geography was a little off there. Okay. And here, I'm going to throw one out since you said that about hunters, and then I got to take a break and we'll come back.
Sure.
But something I think people in the east of the United States are not sensitive to at all is how much land is off limits here in the West. And Easterners think, well, it's terrible to sell an acre of federal land. And literally 90% of the state of Nevada is owned by the federal government. I mean, that's a prudential problem for another time, maybe.
That's a major prudential problem.
We'll be right back with more on Catholicism and the environment. Your calls are welcome, 888-318-7884.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley of the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
I was listening to the EWTN, and you were on with one of your little snippets, and you said some words that brought me back to the church. I've been away for a long time. You don't know how much I appreciate those words, and I don't know why those particular words that day got to me.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I realized after I made my point about land that it's utterly irrelevant to the conversation we're having. It's just as a Westerner, we get mad at you East Coast people that you don't understand the land out here. 888-318-7884 is our number. We're going to go to Houston, Texas now, listening on EWTN. Catherine down in Houston, Texas, you are next. Go ahead with your question for Dr. William Fahey.
Well, thank you. I am so grateful to have been in the car and heard Dr. Fahey saying all of these amazing words. I was a convert 25 years ago, and I have just loved learning more and more about my faith, and Catholic Answers is a great way to do that. But everything I seem to see through a lens of my Catholic faith. So the clean water, regenerative farming, dirt, pasture-raised ranching, ecosystems, our body, contraception, abortion. My faith says all of these things are in relationship. And there is such a disposability of everything right now, and the mentality of just because we can doesn't mean we should. And to me, Catholicism brings wisdom and freedom. And it dawned on me as I was listening to all the calls into Dr. Fahey that Christ sent out the apostles as like the ultimate model of sustainability. Go out and do your job with nothing but your sandals.
I think not even sandals one time.
Yeah. My question is there a book or a blog or a short film or a resource that is not Summa for the average layperson? My younger brother, who's not Catholic, is coming to visit with his wife and one son, and he has subscribed recently to all of the worldview of, everything's going to heck in a handbasket, and one child is your responsibility, and all of these things. And I would love to share something with him and just enjoy reading it myself.
Okay.
I would recommend for you, and did you say it was your brother?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. One thing you might want to get, and then you could read it ahead of time and pick out perhaps sections to share with him, is a volume that is published by the Catholic University of America Press, and it's the writings and speeches of Pope Benedict XVI on the environment and creation. And the book has a title like In God's Garden or something like that. I can't remember the exact title, but it's fairly easy to find if you went to the CUA Press website. Benedict XVI, it's his speeches, some of excerpts from his writings about the environment. And Benedict, I don't know if he coined the phrase, but very important to him was advancing an idea called human ecology. And human ecology was his way of addressing exactly what you have raised, exactly what your brother is suffering from. This good desire to see support of the environment and to stand against any of the destructive forces that are out there. How destructive they are is hard to know. But matching that with the necessity of always keeping the human person in that ecology and helping people to see the connection between humans and the concerns that they have. Human sexuality and contraception is a very difficult matter to talk about with most people. This book might give some indirect approaches just to the ability to be able to say, well, what do you think? And just begin a conversation with your brother on this matter.
The book is, I think you said it,
That's the one.
Darren found it for us, The Garden of God Toward a Human Ecology. Who'd you say the publisher was?
Catholic University of
America, which...
I don't get a kickback for that. I am a
but
graduate.
You did go there.
I got my doctorate.
I just want to check back in with you, Catherine. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's marvelous. And I'm so grateful to also have another university to put on our list to consider for my boys heading off to college in a few years, because they could have Dr. Fahey. That would be
Absolutely.
incredible.
Have them come up for a summer program. We run a variety of summer programs over the month of July. They're virtually free, and it'd be a wonderful opportunity for him to meet my colleagues. He'd get a good taste of New England and a great chance to see what it's like at Thomas More College. It'd be great.
And we charge for ads.
Outstanding.
Catherine, I feel like you had the way you expressed at the beginning of your call a vision of the way a Catholic thinks about the world that was very beautiful to me. I'd like to actually get you, Dr. Fahey, to comment on that. But this almost intuitive sense that comes from having your Catholic goggles on, of connection with the world, but what happens in your soul and in your body are connected to what happens in the world. You have a duty to the world. All of this has an interconnection that is like somehow it's intuitive to the Catholic mind.
It is. One of the big differences between the Reformers and the Catholic Church was, interestingly, on this issue. If you read Martin Luther's commentary on the Psalms, in the opening of that, he takes on the Dominicans. And he takes them on over something that relates to this. I'm not going off into the weeds. He takes them on because he doesn't like what he says, the scholastic view that human nature is only bent. Because his view is it's destroyed.
Yes, yeah.
Right, so the role of grace for Luther is it's got to cover up this mess, this horrible things that is humanity. Well, if you think about it, that's at the root of environmentalism. Whereas what he was arguing against was the scholastic view, which is sin has bent our nature a little bit, but it's still oriented towards its creator. And I think most human beings, if they can be put in a situation that's just kind of calm, feel comfortable talking, it's friendly, it's depoliticized, on reflecting in their own life, they realize they're an integrated person that desires the truth, desires goodness, is moved by beauty. We're all hardwired by our Creator for certain goods. It's just true.
Yes, yeah, integrated is the word. That's a wonderful word. Catherine, thanks for that call. It was really great talking with you.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you both.
You too. Thank you. Let's go to Larry in Hayes, Kansas, listening on EWTN. Go ahead, Larry, with your question for Dr. William Fahey.
Yes, thanks for taking my call, Dr. Fahey. I'm a farmer. I think I told the skull screener that, call screener, and growing up, we were what I view as the ultimate environmentalists. I mean, we saved everything. When we slaughtered, we virtually used everything but the squeal from the pig, and we throwing food away at the table was just that was like a mortal sin. So we were, and in terms of recycling, everything was recycled. But my question is, we seem to have gotten away from that, and even perhaps, and maybe I missed it in the Pope's talk, but it boils down to the individual, the smallest unit of government. Why has the environmental movement now they advocate for population control rather than for conservation efforts? It makes no sense to me.
Larry, thanks. I'm just going to let Dr. Fahey comment because we're at the end here, but what do you make of what Larry had to say?
Well, first of all, I'm glad a farmer called. You're exactly right. Many of these proposals for the correct behavior to be a good environmentalist are really what used to just be called thrift and sensible behavior. Eat your food, don't throw it away, and reuse things. These are ancient ideas. Why do environmentalists so often advocate for population control rather than conservation? In fairness, I think the majority of environmentalists steer clear of population control. and they stick with stewardship of the land, the vast majority. But all the noise and heat is generated by a minority who have the position you just told us about.
Yeah, and there's the thing of what happens among environmentalists, but then the way that journalists and television people interpret that,
Yep, and
then they put their
exploit it.
own spin on it.
Exploit it, that's right.
Right. And so it's almost like a process of distilling down to a purer and purer anti-humanism as the message gets
Usually
to
goes
people.
hand in hand. If someone advocates population control, they actually don't know the science of environmentalism.
Very well said. Dr. William Fahey has been our guest. He got himself a free commercial, but I'll give him one too. You should check out Thomas More College in New Hampshire. Thank you very much, Dr. Fahey.
My pleasure.
Really
It was
appreciate
really fun.
Coming up, Jimmy Akin, we're going to take your Bible questions. If you got a question about the Bible, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you believe in the Bible or not, whether you know a lot or you know a little, your question is welcome here. 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, Jimmy Akin. Our guest this hour, and you can ask any Bible question you want. It's your Bible questions with Jimmy Akin. The number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. And the name Jimmy Akin does many things. One of them is it gets people to dial the phone. So there's only 2 lines open right now. So if you got a Bible question, start dialing. And then we'll get you in the queue and you can ask Jimmy your question. Once again, 888-318-7884. Jimmy is the author of The Bible is a Catholic Book, a book that we here at Catholic Answers are very, very proud of and full of answers about the Bible. You got a question, he's the man to answer it. Jimmy is also the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World and senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. Hello, senior apologist Jimmy Akin.
Hello, author of A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy Kellett.
It's very nice to see you on this Friday afternoon, Jimmy Akin.
Likewise. How are you doing?
Very well. Very well. I haven't gotten to the end of today's episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, so don't give it away for me.
Okay.
But I'll get there. On the ride home, I think I'll get there.
You told me you've been listening to it already. So.
Yeah, I started listening. Yeah. And next week is a spooky episode, right?
Yes, next week is a ghost story. It's about a Border Patrol agent here in San Diego in the 1990s named Luis Santiago, who died on the job and then, according to his colleagues, came back as a ghost and tracked down his killer.
I love that story. All right, looking forward to that one. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World has, scores of already completed episodes on all kinds of mysteries, mysteries of the faith, mysteries of science, mysteries of the natural world. You can find it at Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World on the internet. Look at the lines are already full, so that's great. We got a lot of Bible questions, and we're going to get right to them. I do want to say there's news today. The Pope Francis issued motu proprio on the celebration of the Mass and where and when the traditional form of the Mass can be celebrated. But I think all we'll do is we'll send you to for a reference to the Pillar Catholic, who did a wonderful breakdown of it. So they tell you what the state of things was before, what the state of things is now, and they broke it down into little sections that you can digest. But I imagine many people will have questions about that, Jimmy, but we'll probably at least take the weekend to read and reflect before we try to answer those questions.
Indeed, yeah. I've already read the motu proprio and the accompanying letter to bishops that Pope Francis released, and we'll definitely have more to discuss in the future.
Our number here, 888-318-7884. Well, as I said, the lines are full, so I'm just going to go straight to Teresa in Pennsylvania. So glad you called, Teresa. Go ahead with your Bible question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering, I've done some research on this, and the question is perplexing. And in the Bible it says that, or Jesus says, that the road to heaven is narrow and the road to hell is wide, and that most people will be on that wide road, and that the narrow road, the more difficult road, is the narrow road, and that that few will be on that narrow road. And other people say, even following words of, say, Bishop Barron, and even some popes make it sound that few people, if I can put this correctly, that it seems that a lot of people are going to heaven.
Yeah.
Most people will go to heaven. But then when I read the scripture, it makes it sound that few people are going to heaven. So
what gives?
Yeah.
Okay, Jimmy?
Okay. So it's true when you look at certain passages, it does sound more pessimistic regarding how many people are going to be saved. And this is one of them. Now, Jesus doesn't actually say that most people are not going to go to heaven. He phrases himself very carefully, but he doesn't quite say that. And that means that you have to look at more than one passage to try to get a full picture of the Bible's teaching on this subject. And while there are passages like this that sound more pessimistic, there are also passages that sound more optimistic, like I will draw all men to me, or God desires everybody to be saved. And there are a variety of different passages. And what we have to do as interpreters and of the Bible, and what theologians in particular have to do in forming an opinion on this, is look at all of those passages and try to fit them together. And there are different opinions about how to do that. What I would recommend is a discussion of this that was published a number of years ago in the magazine First Things. It's online, so you can find it. It's by Cardinal Avery Dulles. And Cardinal Dulles, who was such a great theologian that he was appointed a cardinal, that's why he became a cardinal. It was in recognition of his theological work and how good it was. But what he concludes is that actually we're not told what the ratio is. That's actually a good thing, because if we knew the odds of getting into heaven are high, we would tend to slack off. And if we knew the odds of getting into heaven were low, we would tend to despair unnecessarily. And so rather than give us a direct answer to the question of are the odds high or low, God wanted to leave us with both hope and warning. And so that's his conclusion, and I think that there is a substantial element of truth there. The name of the article is The Population of Hell. And so if you just go, as Cy says, to your Google machine and type in The Population of Hell, and especially if you can remember the name Avery Dulles, Dulles, just like the airport, which is named after his uncle, then you will come across this article, and it'll give you a fuller picture than what I can on the radio at the moment. One thing I would say in particular about the narrow and broad ways passage is there are a couple of things we want to think about. Jesus, in other passages himself, said, "Come to me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And so whatever the narrow way is, we shouldn't understand it as something terribly difficult or arduous, because Jesus himself makes a point of, no, I came to provide you a way that is not terribly difficult. Now, there may be situations in life that are terribly difficult, but in general terms, the road to heaven is not prohibitively difficult, and so we shouldn't be afraid of it in that way. Another thing to think about is the context in which Jesus is speaking, and who is he speaking about? Well, he's not speaking about, let's say, unborn children that die before they get to do anything good or bad, as St. Paul says. And he's not speaking of small children who are not responsible for their actions. He's speaking of ordinary adult people in the first century. So what do we know about the first century? Well, were there very many people who believed in God at all in the first century? No. There were very few people. Jews were a distinct minority. Only like 10% of the Roman world was Jewish. And there were millions of people elsewhere that had never even heard of God. And so the followers of God were very few in number in the first century, and that may relate to how we should understand this passage. We shouldn't say that Jesus is necessarily saying through all of world history, few people are going to be saved. He may be talking about his own day and the religious conditions that prevailed then. But today, the prophecies of the Old Testament that the earth would be covered with the knowledge of the Lord like the waters cover the sea, that's come true. There are 2 billion Christians in the world and another billion people who believe in God, and almost everybody else has heard of God. And so we're in a very different situation religiously than people were in the first century when he was answering that question, and therefore we need to take that into account when we think about what the passage may mean.
Okay, Teresa?
Okay, well, thank you so much. You've been a great help.
Thanks, and we'll put the name of the article in our show notes. It's called "The Population of Hell" at First Things. But if anybody is like, oh, I wish I had remembered that, it'll just check the show notes at Catholic.com for this episode, and it'll be there. We got to take a quick break. Lots of folks on the line, so lots of fun still to be had. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and it's your Bible questions for Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
This is Raul Caro, founder of the JP2 Catholic Radio Network. Catholic radio promotes the sense of the personal encounter. The type of encounter found between a radio host and callers helps to soften up the heart and open it up to receive the word, which is the good news. As a result, hearts are transformed and lives are saved because of Catholic radio.
The world needs EWTN Catholic Radio, now more than ever.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. Your Bible questions for Jimmy Akin this hour, 888-318-7884. I'm going back to the phones, Jimmy, but I just found this out. I did not know this until just moments ago. You're doing a debate with Dr. William Lane Craig coming up.
Yes. For people who may not be aware, William Lane Craig is a very famous Protestant apologist, and our friend Matt Fradd is having the two of us on his show Pints with Aquinas to discuss an apologetic issue. So it's more of a discussion than a debate per se, but and it's going to be friendly. But basically, one of the most popular arguments for God's existence today is known as the Kalam cosmological argument. And basically, in simple form, it says anything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning. Therefore, the universe has a cause, which would be God. And I actually think that's a good argument, but a lot of apologists present it in ways that I don't think work. In particular, they will try to provide philosophical proofs for the idea that the universe must have a beginning. I think there's scientific evidence that the universe has a beginning, but that's different than what you can prove just by reason alone.
Sure. Yeah.
And people can take different positions on this. Different apologists, including Catholic apologists, have different views. Different doctors of the church have different opinions on this. St. Bonaventure thought that you could prove that the universe must have a beginning by reason alone. But St. Thomas Aquinas, another doctor of the church, said, actually, no, those arguments don't prove what they claim to. And so I think it's a good thing to let both sides of the discussion have a hearing so people are aware of the arguments on both sides. So essentially, Dr. Craig is going to be taking St. Bonaventure's position, and I'm going to be taking St. Thomas Aquinas's.
Well, I know it's just a discussion and not a debate then, Jimmy, but I hope you win the discussion.
Thank you. Me too.
Let's go to Mick in New York, watching on YouTube. Hi, Mick. You got a Bible question?
Yeah. So, first off, I just want to say, I'm a big fan of Mysterious World, Jimmy. I just finished watching the episode earlier today, but that's besides the point.
Oh, you're ahead of me.
Yeah, so my question concerns the infancy narrative that Luke gives, and specifically how we're to reconcile the census of Quirinius with the actual historical accounts we have of it. Such as the fact that, I'm willing to accept that Luke might have been exaggerating things a little bit, like when he says that the whole world should be registered. You know, that's clearly an exaggeration.
That's a figure of speech.
Yeah, but the fact that Quirinius only became governor in 6 AD, and Luke elsewhere seems to also place this before the death of King Herod. It feels like it's hard to reconcile these unless, I'd be, yeah.
Well, let's let Jimmy give it a shot. Can they be reconciled, Jimmy?
Okay. Yeah, and they can be reconciled multiple ways because there are two problems here, two fundamental problems. One is we have an incomplete knowledge of the various censuses that were taken. Also, this may not be a census at all. When we hear about a census, we think, or biblical commentators tend to think, of a tax registration census. And that's what could be going on here, but the word that Luke uses does not specify a tax registration census. He says an enrollment took place. But you can be enrolled for different purposes. And we happen to know that in the year 2 to 3 BC, which is the year that the church fathers say Jesus was born, and that you could also deduce from Luke, that the entire Roman people, and the Jewish historian Josephus talks about this, and Roman sources talk about this, but the entire Roman people pledged allegiance to Augustus Caesar as the father of the Roman Empire. And that involved taking an oath. And we know about that part of it because Josephus says that there were 6,000 Pharisees who refused to take the oath. But other people did. They didn't have a problem saying, okay, yeah, he's the political leader, and so, you know, he's the political father of the Roman world. And except for these 6,000 Pharisees, other Jewish people did. And so it has been proposed that that's actually what Luke is talking about. Now, in terms of Quirinius' involvement in this, there are a couple of aspects to it, and they both deal with the other fundamental issue I mentioned, which is the language that Luke uses. In addition to our incomplete knowledge of all the different enrollments that were taken in this period, Luke's language can mean several different things. One of them is concerning Quirinius's position at the time, because he doesn't say in Greek when Quirinius was governor. He says when Quirinius was governing. And Quirinius had a long career that included more than just the period where he was an official governor. He also had other titles where he was working in this general part of the world, which was considered Syria by the Romans. Palestine was part of Syria. That you could say, well, he may not have technically had the title governor yet, but he was still performing a governing function. And that may be what Luke is talking about. On the other hand, Luke says this is before the first census, which was he's obviously envisioning some famous census. And if you look at the Greek once again, the term can be translated more than one way. It can also be translated before. And so what Luke may be saying, because Quirinius did take a famous census, he may be saying this occurred before that census. And so he may be distinguishing this event to let the reader know it's not the famous one that you're thinking about, it's before that. So there are actually multiple ways of dealing with this. And I think Pope Benedict XVI, in his books, Jesus of Nazareth, was right when he dealt with this. Obviously, Luke knew what he was talking about, and other people knew what he was talking about. Otherwise, Luke wouldn't have bothered saying this. The question is, for us, how do we figure it out, given our incomplete knowledge of the period and the flexibility of Luke's language?
Mick, thank you very much. Appreciate that question. There are lots of folks on the line, so we will keep moving. I hope that was helpful to you. Up next in Ohio, Claire. Hello, Claire. Are you there with us?
Yeah.
Hi, Claire. How old are you?
I'm 8.
You're 8. Well, thank you very much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Mr. Aiken.
Why did Moses' mommy put him in a basket?
She put Moses in a basket because she wanted to keep him safe. At the time, the Israelites, including Moses' family, were living in Egypt. and the Egyptians were getting a little scared of the Israelites. And so what the king of Egypt, a man called Pharaoh, did was he said that all of the baby boys among the Hebrews needed to be killed. And that was a very wicked thing, but that's what he said. And so when Moses was born, obviously he's a baby boy, and so the Egyptians wanted him dead, and his mom kept him hidden in secret for several months. But eventually he got too big, and because you know how loud babies are, they cry as they get bigger, their cries get louder. There came a point where she simply couldn't hide Moses anymore. So she shifted to a new way of trying to protect him. She put him in a basket and put him in the Nile River, and she sent his sister to go watch over the basket and see what happened to him, because obviously they cared about Moses, the new baby. And so what they were hoping is that somebody would find the baby in the basket and maybe not know he was a Hebrew baby and take care of him. And that's what happened. The daughter of the king, the daughter of Pharaoh, found him and took him out of the river and decided to raise him as one of her children. But since she needed someone to nurse Moses, she needed someone, who would breastfeed him. Moses' sister Miriam said, "Ooh, I know someone who can do that." And so she said, Pharaoh's daughter said, "Okay, who do you know that can do that?" And she said, "My mom." And so Moses' mom actually got to take care of him and nurse him, even though he was now legally being raised as Pharaoh's grandson. Incidentally, this custom of putting babies in baskets and leaving them is something that happens elsewhere in the world in history. When people have a baby they can't take care of, in our culture, sometimes in the past, before we had good adoption agencies, people would sometimes put a baby in a basket that they couldn't take care of and leave it on someone's doorstep, hoping that person would take it into their home. But in the ancient world, they apparently sometimes would put them in a river and let them float down the river so someone could find them. And it wasn't just Moses that happened to. A famous king over in Iraq, in Mesopotamia, named Sargon the Great, also had that happen to him. So this isn't just something that Moses' mom thought of for the first time. Other people in the ancient world did the same thing when they had a baby they couldn't take care of and they wanted to find someone who could take care of it.
Okay, Claire?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for calling. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I hope you'll call again. Thank you very, very much. Our number is 888-318-7884. It's Bible Open Forum, and Jimmy is here to answer your questions. Any Bible question, welcome. And anybody welcome, whether you're Catholic, whether you're Christian or not. Danny in Jacksonville, Florida, listening or watching on Catholic.com. You there, Danny?
Yes.
All right, Danny, go ahead with your question.
So my question is about a claim that I have seen that the ancient Hebrews had a mythology or mythology or whatever of gods, that they believed that there were other gods who existed, and that they were only meant to worship Yahweh as God, but they believed in the existence of other gods and deities, and that the first commandment was towards simply not worshiping those other gods, not that there weren't any.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, how do I address this?
So the answer is going to depend on a couple of things. One of them is, which Israelites are you talking about? Because if you're talking about many Israelites, all the way back to the Exodus, it's clear that many of them did believe in other gods and even worshipped them. That's the problem with the golden calf incident, for example. And even after they moved into the land, they would worship other gods, including Baal and Asherah and Anat and Molech and various other deities. And the prophets condemned them for that and said, no, this is not what's supposed to happen. So there was this kind of folk polytheism that was around among some Israelites. But then there were other Israelites who were Orthodox, and the question is, what did they believe about other gods? Well, the term for God in Hebrew is Elohim, and Elohim can actually mean a number of different things. It can mean the creator God, the one true God. It can also mean other deities like, Baal or Zeus or whatever. But it also can mean, it can refer to angels, and it can even refer to departed human souls. There's in the famous incident where Saul calls up Samuel. Samuel's spirit is called an Elohim as it rises from the ground. And on that, as a cliffhanger, I'll tell you more on the other side of the break.
Danny, hang on. We'll get an answer to your question. We'll try to get an answer to everybody else who is on the line. It's Bible questions for Jimmy Akin this hour. We'll be right back with more of that right after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Enter promo code EARLY to save $30. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's always fun to finish out a Friday with some Bible questions for Jimmy Akin. We got a whole bunch of Bible questions for Jimmy Akin. Danny in Jacksonville had asked Jimmy before we went to the break about the ancient Hebrews, the ancient Israelite people. Did they believe in other gods besides God? And Jimmy, you were in the midst of your answer.
Yeah, so the term Elohim in Hebrew can mean a bunch of different things. If I were to try to find an English word that had the same range of meaning, that could cover everything from the creator to angels to even departed human souls, the term that would spring to mind would be spirit.
Yeah.
And so if you asked, well, did the ancient Hebrews believe in more than one spirit? Well, yeah, they did. The question is then, how do you classify the different spirits that there are? And at least in Orthodox Judaism or Israelitism, from very early on, it was recognized that Yahweh was a spirit unlike any other. He was greater than all the other spirits. He was the creator of all of the spirits. So he was the creator of the angels. He was the creator of humans. He was the creator of the entire world. And so while there were bunches of different kinds of spirits out there, and thus bunches of different kinds of Elohim, there was only this one incomparable creator, and he just so happens to have made a covenant with us, and he's the only one we're going to worship as a result, because we're his special people. He's taken us to himself. So that leaves open, well, what about these other nations? What you actually find when you study the issue is that the ancient Hebrew worldview held that God had assigned what we today would call angels to oversee other nations. And so each nation had an angel or a set of angels that was watching over it. And even Israel had that. Israel had Michael. In Daniel, Gabriel tells Daniel that Michael is the great prince of your people. And so the great angel looking out for Israel is Michael. But also God has a special relationship with Israel directly, whereas he doesn't have that same direct relationship with other nations that are under the care of these other angels. And we get references to them in various passages in the Bible as well. And once again in Daniel, when Gabriel shows up at one point to talk to Daniel, he says, by the way, I got your text message several weeks ago when you first prayed.
That is not right.
But I couldn't get here sooner because on my way here, the prince of Persia opposed me. And he's referring to the angelic prince that God had put in charge of Persia. And then Michael came and helped me out, and he's got the prince of Persia in a headlock right now. And then once I'm done talking to you, I'm going to go back, and Michael and I are going to kick his butt. And after that, the prince of Greece is going to come. And meaning that the Greek nation is going to rise in influence under the leadership of its angel. But you notice what's happening here is that these angels that are in charge of various nations are not all on the same page. They're fighting. And some of them, like the Prince of Persia, are resisting what God wants to happen. God wanted Gabriel to go talk to Daniel, and the Prince of Persia resisted him. And so since some of these angels are doing bad things, that means they're bad angels, and thus they're demons. And that's why the early church fathers and St. Paul would indicate that the gods of the nations are demons. It's not that they don't exist, it's that they're angelic beings, and frequently they've gone bad. And so that's kind of a basic sketch of the Hebrew worldview in this regard. For more information, I'd suggest you check out episode 112 of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, which is on God and the Gods.
Danny, thanks. Appreciate that question. It's Bible Questions for Jimmy Akin this hour. Up next, Steve in Westfield, Indiana, also watching on Catholic.com. Glad to have you, Steve. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Howdy.
Howdy.
I was reading 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and I was getting to verses 29 through 31, where Paul is talking about an impending distress and the appointed time being very short and the form of the world passing away. And I know that our view of inspiration is that it affects those things which are asserted by the author. And I was wondering how our view of inspiration deals with those passages which seem to be saying that the end of the world is coming soon.
Well, St. Paul doesn't actually say that the end of the world is coming soon. What he says is that the world is passing away in its present form. And that just means that there's going to be some big transition happening in the world. And that was certainly true from Paul's perspective. So this is 1 Corinthians. So he's writing this about the year 53. And Jesus had predicted that there was trouble on the horizon, that within a generation there would be a big conflict that would result in the destruction of the Jewish temple. And in fact, there was such a conflict, and it had broader ramifications than just in Israel. It's actually kind of amazing when you read about the history of the Jewish war of the AD 70s. It's not just Israel where everything has been thrown into chaos. It's also Rome itself, because AD 69, which is smack dab in the middle of the Jewish war, is known as the Year of Four Emperors, because after Nero was forced to commit suicide, they had a series of 4 emperors that each ruled only a few months because they kept knocking each other over in violent civil wars. And so the entire Roman world was convulsed. It wasn't just in Israel, it was everywhere in the Roman world. And so Jesus was right that there is going to be this time of trial coming, and it's going to affect multiple nations, and you're going to be hearing wars and rumors of wars and things like that. But it wasn't necessarily clear, because Jesus also prophesied his own second coming, it wasn't clear what the relationship between those two events were. And so what we have here is Paul with the knowledge that Jesus has predicted that within a generation a bunch of stuff is going to happen and it's going to be stressful, and Paul's applying that advice to the situation of the Corinthians, not as a matter of requirement, but just as a matter of counsel. I mean, he goes out of his way in this same chapter to say, if you really need to get married, don't worry about it. You know, that's okay. You're not doing anything sinful. This is a matter of practical judgment here that he's giving them. It's a matter of advice. And so, well, he was right about these things. There was this period of stress that happened. But it was eventually revealed that these events are definitely distinct from the second coming. And that was also revealed before the events happened, at least in my view, because in my view, the book of Revelation tells us when it was written, and it was written during the year of 4 emperors. And in Revelation, John learns of this vast period of time known as the millennium, or the 1,000 years, that must occur before the second coming. And so before the temple was destroyed, I would say God had already revealed that no, these two events are definitely distinct, and the end of the world is not going to happen for a vast period of time, even after what's happening right now.
Steve, I hope it was helpful. We're going to leave it there because we got to take a break right now. Treat yourself. You can head over to shop.catholic.com and treat yourself to 25% off anything or everything. It's all on sale, 25% off when you put in the promo code TREAT, T-R-E-A-T. Put in that promo code at shop.catholic.com, get 25% off the whole order.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
I'm Jeanette DeMello, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register and co-host of Register Radio with Matthew Bunson. Join us every week as we talk with the Register's expert writers and editors about the news you need to know and offer authentic Catholic insights on the important stories that impact your life. Register Radio, every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern and Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, here on EWTN Global Catholic Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest, which is a good thing because the topic of the show is your Bible questions for Jimmy Akin. It would be weird if he wasn't here to do it. Your Bible questions are welcome, and there are a bunch on the line. So let me just keep moving. Ryan in Oklahoma. Also, listening on the new and improved Catholic Answers Live app. Hi, Ryan. You got a question for Jimmy?
Hey, Si. How you doing? Yes, I have a question for Jimmy. I was I've been kind of studying textual criticism here the last few years, and that's something that really helped me get back into the church and finish receiving my sacraments of initiation. But I was wondering if there's any kind of a go-to passages in the New Testament where they use the Septuagint that we could use, Matthew 1, for instance, the prophecy of the Virgin from Isaiah, stuff like that.
So, Ryan, you just want to know if Jimmy could give you the name of some or just point out some passages that are obviously references to the Septuagint version of the Bible?
Yes.
Got it.
Well, not off the top of my head, but I can do better than that. I can tell you where to get a complete list of them. Now, one of the things people will sometimes ask for is, did Jesus ever quote the Septuagint? And the answer is, we don't know, because from the evidence we have in the Gospels, Jesus conducted his ministry primarily in Aramaic, and so he would not have been quoting the Septuagint in Aramaic. But the Gospels as we have them are written in Greek. And so what we can say is, even though we don't know whether Jesus ever quoted the Septuagint, because we don't know if he ever used Greek in his ministry, he may have, but we just don't know that. We can say the New Testament authors use the Septuagint, and they use it constantly. If you look at the quotations of the Old Testament in the New Testament, depending on how you count them, between 80 and 90% of them are clearly based on the Septuagint. And there's a resource I can recommend that lists them. It's a book by a couple of Protestant authors. Their names are Gregory Chirichinho and Gleason Archer. And the book is called Old Testament Quotations in the New Testament, A Complete Survey. And it's available, it's in print. The title again is Old Testament Quotations in the New Testament, A Complete Survey by Gleason Archer and Gregory Chirichinho. And what they do is they go through, they show you the New Testament quotation in Greek, then they show you the Old Testament Septuagint version and other versions, and they classify them based on their degree of similarity to the Septuagint. And a number of years ago in my copy, I counted them all up and I did the math, and according to Archer and Chirichinho's survey, it's like, depending on how you reckon given categories, 80 or 90% of them are coming from the Septuagint. So it was the standard version of the Bible that the New Testament authors are quoting from.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate the call. Hope it was helpful. We're going to Michael now in Joppa, Maryland, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Michael, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. Hi, Cy.
Hi, Michael.
Question. We've been reading the book of Tobit along with Father Mike Schmitz in his Bible in a year. And Tobit is, I guess, more like a novella, historical fiction. It gets at essential truths, but probably didn't happen that way. Well, and actually earlier, Jimmy, you were talking about Gabriel and Michael. Those two archangels appear in either historical, apocalyptic, prophetic books of the Bible, but Raphael appears only in Tobit, which is, again, historical fiction. And the Church recognizes those three archangels, but I'm wondering why they actually recognize Raphael, given the book that the only book that he appeared in was more fiction.
Okay, Jimmy?
So I think there are a number of things that could be said here. I think one reason is because historically the Tobit was assumed to be more historical than it now appears. Now, if you go to, for example, John Paul II talked about how Tobit is not history properly so called. It's something that may incorporate some historical elements, and it definitely does incorporate some historical elements. You know, it refers to the conquest of the northern tribes by Assyria, for example, and that's a historical event. So it incorporates historical elements, but it's actually more of a teaching document, like an extended parable that shows God's care for his people. And I think that's true, but historically, people assumed it was more historical than it turned out to be. And so, and that was not recognized for a long time because we weren't as familiar with, people in Europe were not as familiar with how ancient Israelite literature worked. And now that we've learned more about Israelite literature and its ancient Near Eastern context and so forth, it's more obvious to us what kind of document this is than it was to many people in the Middle Ages when the liturgical calendar was being formed. And so I think that's one reason. Another thing, though, is, well, even if and even though Tobit is not a simple historical work, like we said, it can include actual historical elements, including people. If Tobit, let's say, mentioned, Nebuchadnezzar, well, Nebuchadnezzar, like Judith does, Judith mentions Nebuchadnezzar, and he's a real historical person, even though Judith is like Tobit. It's not straightforward history. And so because works of this nature can mention real individuals, Tobit can mention a real angel named Raphael. And Raphael is not only mentioned here in Tobit. Tobit is the only book of the Bible that mentions Raphael, but actually, if you look at the Second Temple era literature, Jewish literature, Raphael gets mentioned a lot. He's one of several angels, and others include Uriel, and there are a variety of different angels that get mentioned in Jewish literature outside the Bible of this period. And so some of these angels may have had contact outside the Bible with God's people, because the Bible is not an exhaustive list of all of God's interactions with his people. And so the name Raphael could have been picked up, on that basis as well, and Raphael may be a real individual up in heaven. Even if you want to press on that, though, think about what Raphael's name means. It means God is my healer, or God heals. And certainly God heals people. And so since God uses angels to administer his will in the world, it's reasonable to understand that God would send angels as part of the healing process, and he may have some angel in charge of all that, and it would make sense for that angel, especially associated with God's healing ministry, to be called Raphael.
And you know what? I'm going to leave it right there because we've got just a short time and lots of folks that still have questions. Thanks very much for the question, Michael. We're going to go to Jerry now in Connecticut, listening on EWTN. Jerry, glad to have you. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, how you doing today? Thanks for taking my question.
Okay, happy to.
As you know, going back in the Old Testament, the Israelites or Hebrews used to do sacrifices to God, animals. They would go to the temple and they would get the animals and sacrifice to God. Now, Jesus came and was the ultimate sacrifice. After Jesus died and rose from the dead and ascended, how long after that did that wane off, the going to the temple, buying the birds or so forth or whatever,
and making animal
sacrificing?
Okay, Jerry, thanks.
37 years, exactly. The reason being that 37 years after the crucifixion, the temple was destroyed. And because the Israelites were bound to sacrifice, or I should say the Jewish people were bound to sacrifice only at the temple in Jerusalem, they therefore stopped performing animal sacrifice at that time, once the temple was destroyed in AD 70. But there are a few footnotes to this that one should be aware of. The first one is, in addition to the Jewish people in the southern kingdom of Judah, there was the Israelite people, the 10 northern tribes that had seceded from the Union after the time of Solomon, that lived in Samaria. In other words, the Samaritan Israelites. And they had a temple too. Theirs was on Mount Gerizim, and theirs also had been destroyed. But they kept sacrificing anyway. And in fact, today, they sacrifice Passover lambs on Mount Gerizim. So Samaritan Israelites have actually kept up the practice of animal sacrifice, even though they don't have a built, fully restored temple at this point. And there's a second footnote, and this can be a little delicate, but there are rites that are performed in Judaism that an outside observer would look at and say, that looks like animal sacrifice. As part of the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur, there's a ritual that is performed in some Jewish communities where known as kapparos, which is a word for atonement, where you take, sometimes it's a chicken, sometimes it's a fish, but you take let's say a chicken, and you declare it to be your kapparos, your atonement, and you slay it, and it's, even though you're not doing it at the temple in Jerusalem, it is a religious rite that involves the death of an animal to God in connection with atonement. And even though it may be a little delicate to say that that's animal sacrifice, that's what it looks like. Like I said, sometimes, now not all Jewish people are comfortable with this. And in fact, some of them may not even be aware that this happens, but it does. And some Jewish people who are not so comfortable killing a chicken, they may get a fish from the market and use that. Or sometimes they'll use money in place of an animal sacrifice. But the kapparos ritual is a real thing, and in some versions of it, it still seems to incorporate animal sacrifice, even though it's kind of sort of on the down low and is not done in the same way that such sacrifices were done at the temple in Jerusalem.
Jerry, thank you. Yes.
By the way, one other interesting footnote. Mm-hmm. Even though Jewish people are not supposed to, according to the standard rabbinic interpretation and accepting kapparos, they're not supposed to sacrifice except at the temple in Jerusalem, which they can't do because there's no temple there now. Gentiles are not bound by that requirement in rabbinic law. And so there have been cases where, and Christians should not do this because we have our own sacrifice, which is Christ. But there have been cases in history where Gentiles have wanted to sacrifice to the God of Israel, and according to the rabbis, it's okay for Jewish people, for like Jewish priests, to teach the Gentiles how to sacrifice to God, because they're not bound to do it at Jerusalem. They can do it anywhere if they want to worship God. And so there have been cases where Jewish priests would instruct Gentiles in, okay, here's how you do a sacrifice to our God, and it's okay for Gentiles to do that in rabbinic views.
How interesting. Jerry, thanks. I really appreciate that question. Jimmy Akin here. It's Your Bible Questions, and Patricia's on the line from Meridian, Idaho. Patricia, thanks so much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
I'm trying to understand the Judeo-Christian burial practices that honor the body. When someone is cremated, do not spread the ashes, except one priest I know said, well, unless you bless the land first, and then you can spread the ashes. And I've heard that Kennedy was cremated. He was not emptied into the sea, but he was planted into the sea.
So,
and I just want to understand the biblical burial practices.
What does the Bible tell us about burial?
I don't know which Kennedy you're referring to, but maybe Ted Kennedy. But for a second I was thinking John F. Kennedy, and he was not cremated. In biblical times, now we don't have complete knowledge, but in biblical times there was more than one kind of burial practice that was used. In Egypt, mummification was used, and some Israelites were mummified. And we know that because we're told that the patriarch Jacob and the patriarch Joseph were both mummified while they were in Egypt. More commonly, and by the time of Jesus, it was common to entomb a departed loved one in a burial chamber like a cave, let's say, and then you waited for the body to deteriorate. And a year later, after the body had deteriorated, you would come back and you would clean the bones, and then you would store the bones in a special container known as an ossuary, which just means a bone container. And then you would put the bone container in the family crypt. And so that was a standard practice at the time of Jesus. And it's kind of like cremation because it does, you're not using fire, but it does depend on the body deteriorating. And then you collect the bones, which is what's left, and you put those together in one place. Now, modern Catholic practice about don't scatter the ashes, but inter them in one place, that's a matter of church law rather than divine law. It seems to be. Divine law doesn't seem to mandate one way of honoring the dead, but this is how we currently do it as Catholics.
Thanks, Patricia, for that question. Thanks to everybody who called. I'm sorry for a couple we didn't get to, but we got to almost everybody. Jimmy Akin, thank you for a very fine hour.
My pleasure, Psychelic.
We'll see you next week. I don't know if we're having a Monday show. I really don't, because today is Marie's last day, and it's 50-50 whether Darren and I are capable of organizing a show without her. So we'll see. But Marie, God bless you. Happy travels. Thanks for everything. We'll see you next time, God willing. And if Darren and I can get our act together right here on Catholic Answers Live.